And I remember it kind of caught my attention, and I had a friend actually at the time who was getting into it, and he was trying to argue with me, and I, like most people, argued against Bitcoin, and I was like, oh, this is a scam. It's to get us into a cashless control grid. It's this and that. And so I thought I knew what it was from a kind of an overly conspiratorial perspective. But I'm glad all that happened because it forced me to look deeper into it to see if that in fact was the case. And every one of my objections kind of fell the more that I looked into it.
I wrote The Bible and Bitcoin for you, Bible-believing Christian, and in it I lay out the biblical basis for what money is, why our current fiat monetary system is ungodly, and how Bitcoin is the best and most viable, biblically compliant replacement for government fiat money. There's even a small group study guide in the back with additional resources to study with your church small group. Get it on Amazon or pay with Bitcoin at thebibleandbitcoin.com for a discount. Welcome to another episode of the Bible and Bitcoin podcast. I'm your host, Alan Armstrong, aka Pastor Coin, and on today's episode I have Mr. Jay Dyer. Welcome to the show, Jay.
What's up, man? Glad to be here. Thanks for reaching out. Looking forward to conversing with you.
Yes, indeed. I found you debating Muslims, and I thought, wow, I like this guy, and followed you on Twitter and enjoyed much of your work. And then I saw that you are a Bitcoin proponent, I guess you could say. So
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your beliefs, and things like that.
Yeah, I come from the Bible Belt. I was raised in Tennessee, grew up part of the time in California. My dad was in the Navy, so I was always in the church, so to speak, from a young age, Baptist church. I eventually, by the time I was senior in high school, college, started studying church history, and that got me more moving in the direction of, at that time, Catholicism and Orthodoxy. I was trying to decide between the two. This was a long time ago. Eventually ended up in the Orthodox Church, so I defend that as Christianity from my vantage point. The last, say, 5 years, I think, has really kind of picked up in terms of Muslim debates. That's not something I really thought I was going to be doing. It just kind of fell into my lap. Hooked up with Shamoon maybe 4 or 5 years ago as well. We started doing a lot of podcasts and interviews and teamed up on some debates, and so that's its own kind of sphere of stuff. We've done a lot of atheist debates. We've done a lot of debates with other religions and groups. So that's one thing I do. But I also do a lot of film analysis, symbolism. So I've written a couple books on Hollywood and film symbolism and kind of the messaging that's going on in movies. I've hosted the fourth hour of the Alex Jones Show for the last 4 or 5 years, every Friday. We did a TV show based on my book, and then I cover a lot of other books that you see behind me. I do a lot of lectures through these texts to kind of do people's homework for them. So I call it the Global Elite Book Series, which gives you an insight into how the elite they themselves think from their own writing. So we do all of that, as well as some comedy and live events, and you can find all that at my website, jaysanalysis.com.
Tremendous. I didn't know all that, so I'll have to go pick up the book and check all that out after this interview. So speaking of Sam Shamoon, it's funny because last year I offered to tip him in Bitcoin. I said, Sam, offer Bitcoin as a as an option to give, and he literally laughed at me and insulted my mother, and then just kind of ignored me. That's okay. I don't mind. It's Sam. When he insulted me, I took it as a as a badge of honor. You know, not everyone gets insulted by Sam Shamoon, so I absolutely don't mind. So Sam, if you watch,
I haven't talked to Sam about anything outside of theology, so I don't know. I have no idea what he would think about that, but he probably thinks, as you know, I'm sure both of us have had infinite conversations trying to explain this kind of stuff to people who have so many misconceptions. So he probably has misconceptions.
Yeah, no doubt. So I started following you, and then recently saw you posting about Bitcoin and some really good tweets and stuff like that. You've been apparently I did some homework. I went back in time, and you've been an outspoken supporter of Bitcoin for a while now. So when did that aha moment come where you were like, wow, this Bitcoin thing is more than just, you know, some numbers on a screen? You know, what contributed to you publicly coming out and supporting Bitcoin?
Yeah, the story in brief was in about 2014, 15, I was invited to a kind of a conspiracy alternate media conference in Texas. And I met some guys that were at the conference who were really cool in Austin, and they ran a show called the Crypto Show. At the time, I had heard of Bitcoin because I heard Max Kaiser. He used to go on Alex Jones all the time back in the day, and he would talk about Bitcoin, but I just kind of put it in the back of my mind. I was like, I don't know what that is. Doesn't mean anything to me. So I'm at this conference in about 2014, 15, somewhere in there, and these guys were like, hey, get a wallet. I'll give you a couple Bitcoin. And I'm like, I don't know what you mean. I don't know what a wallet is. So I just didn't take the time to do it. And around that was around the time that Bitcoin hit maybe 1,000, 2,000, somewhere in there, in that range. And I remember it kind of caught my attention. And I had a friend actually at the time who was getting into it, and he was trying to argue with me. And I, like most people, argued against Bitcoin. And I was like, oh, this is a scam. It's to get us into a cashless control grid. It's this and that. And so I thought I knew what it was from a kind of an overly conspiratorial perspective. But I'm glad all that happened because it forced me to look deeper into it to see if that in fact was the case. And every one of my objections kind of fell the more that I looked into it. I don't think it's not centralized. It doesn't have a CEO. It doesn't have a controller. It's not invented by and run by the CIA and the NSA. And it's not, going to be tracking and tracing everybody in the world. It's not the mark of the beast, on and on and on. So all those objections eventually fell, and I decided about 2017 that I would start buying. I wasn't confident enough yet to talk about it publicly because at that time it was still pretty. That was around the time it hit 3,000 or 4,000 in 2017, somewhere early 2017, maybe May, summer period. And so I wasn't confident enough, and I was kind of an idiot still about crypto. And I remember just buying all kinds of random coins because, that's everybody has these phases. You think, oh, I'm going to buy this one, and they're all going to, this is the next Bitcoin, right? Then you realize, well, there's not really going to be a next Bitcoin probably. But yeah, so by about 2019, 20, I got a little more confident. I'd read a lot more and studied a lot more. I met a girl who was a friend of mine who had written a book, co-written a book on Bitcoin. Her book was really insightful. She actually wrote it from a Christian perspective too. So when I met somebody who was, believing and a Bible-believing person who also wanted to promote Bitcoin, that was another kind of like, okay, you can actually defend this from a Christian perspective, from the ethics of money. This is actually ethical money. So her book, Julia Toriansky's book on Bitcoin, is really good. That was a big game changer for me back in about 2019. It was just kind of like, I think what happens with most of us is we just learn more and more and more. The more you interact with and start stacking Bitcoin over time, you get more confident. You realize just from an investing perspective, it's not bad. And then we couple that with the ethics and you realize, this is scam money. This is actually the hardest type of money. Proverbs says to not have deceptive weights and measures for your interactions. And the more I thought about that verse in Proverbs, the more I thought this really applies to the principles behind fair, ethical, objective, hard money in terms of Bitcoin. So those were some of the things that, like big things that happened on the way. And then, like I said, about 2020, I just got more confident about being vocal and public about it, tweeting about it, started using Twitter more, that was around the time of the, COVID crisis. So, I think it's just borne itself out, now that we have the institutional acceptance that it's not going away, it's not a scam, it's not backed by nothing, it's legit.
I'd love to get your take, if you're willing to give it, on, well, maybe I should word it this way. If you had a Christian come to you and say, hey man, the Bitcoin, it looks like the mark of the beast, it smells like the mark of the beast, it's got to be the mark of the beast. How do you answer that question? Because that's one question, or objection rather, I get all too often. And I've done articles, I've made videos about it, but how would you answer that question or that objection if a Christian says, dude, it's the mark of the beast, can't you see? I mean, you're Jay Dyer, you should see this.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard the same objection, and I mean, I probably thought at one time, maybe in 2014, 15, maybe some around the same lines. And I think I wrote a whole article, which I had to eventually take down. I was so embarrassed about it because I wrote this article. It wasn't saying it was the mark of the beast, but I was arguing in 2014, 15 that, oh, this is the cashless grid that they want to put us in and all that. And I think the more that I looked at, first of all, what money is, so I think you have to do a little more background information. You realize that, money is a representation of our time and energy.
Yeah.
And it's a way to store and transact through currency that time and energy and value. So it's ultimately a kind of intended to be a store of value. That's at least what Bitcoin is. And everybody's familiar with gold. And when I was in various Christian circles back in my 20s, I was around a lot of Protestants who were very into Ron Paul. They were very into the gold standard. And so when I started thinking about it from that perspective, I kind of sold it to a lot of people as digital gold. When you think about it that way, I think especially for a lot of boomers or for a lot of Gen X people who might not understand that there can be value for things that are electronic. Right.
Yeah.
Think about your, even a boomer, for example, you have an app on your phone where you do your banking and you're not actually using physical cash when you do your banking, but you don't think of your online banking app as the mark of the beast. You don't think of using Zelle to transfer cash as the mark of the beast, right? So when I usually try to use these kinds of basic examples about how, Bitcoin's not really that different from gold. Gold wasn't the mark of the beast. The dollar wasn't the mark of the beast. It's a superior form to those things. And if you look at the mark of the beast, there's, I think, some key indicators that Bitcoin just doesn't match up to that. Like the mark of the beast, whatever it is, however it comes about, actually has to be a way to shut down and turn off people's economic abilities if they don't worship this satanic system or the satanic antichrist or whatever, right? But there's nothing in Bitcoin, the protocol, the way it runs, its decentralized node system that would at all work for that. There's a public-private ledger system, but it's not even going to be possible if, for example, let's say the majority of the world converts to utilizing Bitcoin as a reserve standard or as some kind of medium of exchange standard. Like, there's not feasibly any way to track everyone's economic, interactions and to quote turn off, anybody's. And there's no, you're not marked with Bitcoin on your forehead or your hand. So it's like there's so many things about Bitcoin that just don't at all match up and actually would be contrary to, the so-called mark of the beast.
Do you view the mark of the beast as being a primarily physical or spiritual or a mix? Like, are you anticipating an actual sort of physical thing where if you take it, then you're marked, or is this, like what's your take on that?
That's
like
a good question. Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I mean, I just had an interview with my godfather, and he's just published a trilogy commentary on the Book of Revelation by a famous kind of Anglican guy named James Jordan. And that commentary makes the very point, actually, that you're just talking about, that he argues that the mark of the beast is primarily something that's spiritual, that will essentially, for the, angels and demons, mark people for, which kingdom they're a part of. Mm-hmm. So it may not necessarily be an implant or a microchip or a nanodot or whatever the possibilities might be. Maybe it's some kind of implant microchip or something down the road. I don't know, but there's a strong case to be made that it's contrasted to, for example, in the Book of Revelation, the servants of God who are marked also with the name of God. That's presumably not physical. You're not going to get Yahweh tattooed on your forehead, right? Yeah. So you're spiritually marked, contrasted to the spiritual marking that may be the case for the people who accept the beast or whatever. So, yeah, you could make a case that it's not even physical. I don't personally know, but I think you could make that case.
Yeah, the way I've understood it is that, after it seems Revelation 13, everything the beast does is a counterfeit of what the Lamb does or did. And so the mark of the beast is the counterfeit of of the mark of the lamb or the name of God
Exactly.
on the forehead and so
Right.
forth. So even in that paradigm, Bitcoin can't be that
Hmm.
thing
Right.
because it seems like the mark of the beast is anything which would give allegiance to a godless system for economic gain. That's what it seems like to me, at least. So something like the COVID vaccine
Yeah.
was a type of mark of the beast
Yeah.
because a lot of people were like, hey, take this shot or else you can't work or else we're kicking you out of the economic system
Yeah.
here.
Exactly.
Essentially, the COVID vaccine mandates were take this or starve. That was sort of the the ultimatum. So Bitcoin doesn't fit in any way you look at it, and it can't.
Yeah, really the only parallel I could even loosely see would be that it's, quote, cashless. But I mean, there's nothing in the book of Revelation or, other apocalyptic texts that necessarily demonstrates that this economic control system has to be non-physical. Like you said, it could be spiritual. It could be, there's different possibilities. But we are basically already not in a quote cash system, right? So it's
All right.
almost like, well, if the mark of the beast is essentially whatever's quote cashless, I mean, I just think it makes more sense to say, well, we're already in a cashless society, so it's like for the
Right.
most part, I mean, and on top of that, cash itself is unethical. So if anything was beast-like, it would be the fiat theft-based system because fiat currency is stealing from future generations' purchasing power. It's a form of theft. That's more of a beast system than what Bitcoin is in principle, ethically.
Bitcoin Well is a non-custodial Bitcoin platform in Canada and the USA. That means every single Satoshi you buy goes straight to your self-custody. They offer free withdrawals, a simple 1% spread, and they have the Bitcoin Wishing Well, where you can win up to 1 million Satoshis by earning points and throwing the coin in the well. In fact, you get 5 coin tosses to the Bitcoin Wishing Well when you sign up at bitcoinwell.com/pastorcoin. Yeah, that was going to be my next question was fiat appears to be a lot more beastly than
Exactly.
Bitcoin is. So how would you interact with somebody who is a sort of a normie in this and just say, hey man, hey, this is one of my pet peeves when people say cash is king, right? I hear this especially with maybe the older types who the boomers who went through
Right.
COVID and were
Right.
freedom fighters. They said, no man, cash is king. How do you explain to these people that physical paper cash is controlled by the same entity that, and they could just sort of cancel that cash any minute. So how do you respond to the cash is king crowd?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I'm just like you. I'm tired of that objection. Just think about the Canadian protesters. They had their bank account shut off. Now, for most people, they don't have stacks of dollars like rappers and like they don't have big wads of cash sitting under their bed. Maybe a few old generation people do, but for most people, the cash means their bank account and their check card or whatever. But the Canadian protesters had all that shut off. They got debanked, and hence they're in a worse situation because they believed cash was king.
Yeah.
When, although it is a little bit of a hassle at this stage in the world, it is possible to have Bitcoin or perhaps stable coins or something like that if you couldn't transact with Bitcoin. But you can get apps like BitPay where you actually can buy groceries, gift cards, etc., with crypto right now. So it is technically possible to live on crypto right now if you're debanked. And already quite a few people who did get debanked, as that Mark Andreessen guy who was talking to Joe Rogan the other day, he pointed out that a lot of people are already kind of, have been saved. You can infer from having various forms of crypto. Obviously, I'm a Bitcoin supremacist. I think it's the best. There might be some uses for stable coins or something like that, but so maybe in the future, people might have to, if they're forced to sell Bitcoin to survive, you might have to sell it into something else or buy gift cards or something like that. So that's possible now, and that's already for people who've been debanked. Like they've already experienced the necessity of these alternate payment systems and these alternate forms of currency transactions. So that is a defeater, I think, for cash is king. Again, that Andreessen guy already told Rogan that there's a secret group that basically tells companies who to debank.
Wow.
Yeah. So this was like the Rogan interview the other day that was going around. If you saw it, he's some kind of Silicon Valley. Wouldn't trust that dude, but I think what he's saying is true, because like Alex was debanked multiple times because some unknown bureaucratic entity basically just said, debank this person, this person, this person, this person. And down the road, that could be all Christians, right?
Right.
Christians need to be debanked because they're hate speech people or whatever. So cash is king doesn't work for that reason, just in terms of the last 4 years. And then cash is not king because cash is based on fiat. It is fiat since the Nixon shock doctrine of taking us off the gold standard. So it's not based on anything. It's that's the Keynesian model of you can print forever, and every fiat currency ever has gone to zero because it's too much of a temptation for centralized private banking entities that control the money printer to just keep printing into oblivion, because they can print and sell the fiat currency to themselves, buy it up through bonds, treasuries, or whatever, and they can buy up real assets with the fake money. So once you figure out that it's a scam, then you realize, oh no, actually cash isn't king. Cash is like the ultimate scam. I mean, the way cash is now, fiat, I'm saying.
Right, right. Because Bitcoin is technically peer-to-peer electronic cash, according to the
Well, and
the white paper.
yeah, exactly. To be precise, like the way that gold bugs believed about gold and the Federal Reserve, like they ought to be the most Bitcoin, right, affiliated people, because
Yeah.
this is a better form of gold, and it's based on all the same principles of what gold at least wanted to be and tried to be, right?
Yeah, yeah. It wasn't necessarily gold's problem, it was a man problem, right?
Exactly.
That
Yeah.
temptation to centralize, that
Right.
temptation to print more than you have. It's not going away. And
Right.
so gold's the vulnerability of gold has been exploited. It's already out there. You can't put that rabbit back in the hat. So it's going to keep happening. That's why I tell people who are gold bugs, hey, let's just get on the gold standard. Well,
Yeah.
we'll just end up on the fiat standard in,
Right.
a couple decades again. It's not fixing the problem.
Great
Bitcoin
point.
actually fixes the problem. And speaking of the problem, Donald Trump, now I'm Canadian, so I went through the whole trucker thing. I'm not a trucker. I wasn't in Ottawa for that. But I know people who were affected. As a matter of fact, the woman that I buy my eggs from, there's a woman, she lives in the county and she has chickens. We buy eggs, great, delicious farm eggs. She gave $25 to the truckers and was debanked for a week
Oh, wow.
for
So
a
you know all about that.
$25 donation.
Wow.
And I felt bad for her because she couldn't access her money to buy groceries, obviously, and so they had to start killing some of their chickens just to eat that week.
Wow.
And so it was absolutely bonkers up here.
Right.
And Bitcoin was, for many people, the saving grace they needed in that time.
Yeah.
And it opened up Bitcoin to a whole new crowd. Now, you're in America, and Donald Trump's talking about the strategic Bitcoin reserve. He hinted at it. I saw you were in Nashville. I was there too. Would have been nice to meet up. I didn't really know you back then. But so you were there. You saw the speech. Do you think this is actually going to happen? Is this a serious thing, or is he just saying what needs to be said?
Of course, politicians oftentimes say what needs to be said, and then, you're lucky if they follow through with half of their or 1/3 of their promises. So, politics is all about compromise. So I don't know if this will ever actually happen, but I am optimistic because at least it looks like he's kind of doing and trying to follow through on some of the stuff, at least maybe half, 3/4 of what he said he's going to do. I think so. I think the bill from Senator Loomis, and I remember her being there. I walked right past her and didn't realize who she was. I probably would have said something, but Yeah, because I listened to her speech too, her talk about the bill, and I think that they're going to try for sure. They have, hopefully the votes and the support, and I think as more corporations pile in, and now that they've figured out what it is, you get more and more companies doing what MicroStrategy's been doing. It's going to be harder to ignore it and act like this isn't a legitimate thing and that this isn't real money. So I would bet on. Hopefully, I think they will move in that direction. Now, I mean, there's a lot of people in the country who are still legacy, committed to what I think is an evil system that are going to try everything they can to, undermine this. But no, I think they're going to actually do it. People are going to start figuring out that it's actually working against your interests to oppose this.
Right.
And so if the U.S. doesn't start doing this, more countries will be like El Salvador, Bhutan. They're going to do it. And they're going to front run, and they're going to have, more Bitcoin in the window of open Bitcoin for 100,000 versus trying to get into Bitcoin when it's 500,000, when it's 1 million in 5-10 years.
Yeah, the Canadian Prime Minister literally called the bottom last cycle when the conservative candidate was going on Bitcoin podcasts and he was being very Bitcoin friendly, and then we hit the bottom, and that's when Justin Trudeau said it was irresponsible for him to recommend Bitcoin. That was the literal 16K bottom.
Oh wow!
And then so this is the trading strategy, guys. Just do the opposite of what Justin Trudeau says,
Right.
and you'll do very, very well with Bitcoin. He called the bottom.
Same with Jim
perfectly.
Cramer, right? Same with Cramer.
Yeah, exactly. Inverse Cramer, inverse Trudeau, and you'll do very well. It's really that easy. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. If the United States does, even if it's not 1 million Bitcoin, even if it's 200,000, whatever it is, to see how the other countries of the world respond, especially Canada, because I mean the U.S. is right there. Without you, we're nothing. And so we're going to have to pick up the slack as well.
Yeah, I saw France was discussing their fully socialist policies of taxing all Bitcoin unrealized gains is what they didn't pass per se, but they're discussing wanting to do that. So, yeah, I mean, I think what happens is that these socialist countries that are they're fully on board with Fabian socialism and even more than Fabian's just full on Marxist socialism, like they're gonna suffer. And people will leave, and Bitcoin will leave. Bitcoin will fly to the places where there is liberty, and those are the places that are going to prosper. So again, it's really against your own interests to act this way. But people who are committed to these evil systems like socialism, like they just double down. They always commit to their own self-destruction, no matter what.
Yeah, that capital will flee quickly. If anything like that happens in Canada, I'm gone. There's not a chance. You tweeted on November 26th a really interesting thing. Recently, you said, I've been listening to various boomer financial expert podcasts and interviews going back a few years to see why they thought Bitcoin was soon going to zero. Most just repeated MSM FUD to sound smart. Many are still doing this. And here's the thing that caught my attention, this sentence here. There's a human psychological reaction here that is purely religious. Could you elaborate a bit more on what you meant by that term, that purely religious?
Yeah, I think that human beings are fundamentally religious beings, meaning that the way they operate about their attachments and what they believe in and what they like and love becomes religious for them. Even if you're an atheist and you don't believe in any God or transcendent realm or anything like that, you're still going to have some kind of religious faith commitment to atheism, to your magical Big Bang worldview that something comes out of nothing, that mud causes minds to exist somehow. Like there's so many magical things going on in the atheist worldview that when you really drill into it, as an example, it's hard to see how they are not magical thinking beings, even way more so than Christians, right? So I was noticing the type of attachment that people have to their positions, even in situations where there's all the evidence to the contrary. And I think we all know about this as like, cognitive dissonance, confirmation bias, all these terms that express the same way that people have religious commitments to things, even if they're irreligious or even if their positions are demonstrably false. They'll still cling to it. And there's a lot of reasons why people do that. One reason is just pride. People are humans are fallen, and so therefore their sin is rooted in pride. They don't want to be wrong. They want to perceive and be perceived as, see themselves as always correct, geniuses, etc. So one thing that happens with probably you and me and everybody who's gone through this journey for this stuff is, we get humbled by it. I could have had 2 more Bitcoin had I listened to the dudes in 2014 and not just assumed that, oh, well, I know better than this and that. I know what this is and blah, blah, blah. I could have been doing much better. So I'm happy and thankful that I did, get involved in 2017. But if I had been a little more perceptive and paid more attention and not been arrogant, I probably would have been doing even better. So we end up really being our own enemies. And, I like to make jokes. I don't hate boomers. I just make a lot of boomer jokes. It's just kind of a shtick I've been doing for like 10 years. And so Bitcoin is just one of those classic things that I love to kind of prod boomers about because they're so hard-headed about it. And I thought that it was like perfect when I was looking at YouTube the other day and the algorithm fed me this video of, I think it was like an old video of Peter Schiff and then an old video of Dave Ramsey and like all of the boomer commentators, and they were just talking about why they don't like Bitcoin, why it's going to zero. I went and found that Peter Zeihan video where he's on Joe Rogan, the famous video where Bitcoin's about to go to zero last year or something, and of course it didn't, obviously. But and I was watching these interviews and listening to all their reasonings, and I noticed, like you said, like they didn't actually put in time and effort to study it, look at it, and understand it. They were literally, as like financial expert men, just repeating what other mainstream media sources had said against Bitcoin, which to me tells me that's just laziness. That's laziness and arrogance, and I'm just going to stick to my position because, well, I'm a successful gold investor and I know my position, so I can't be wrong, right? Which is, again, is just hurting yourself. It's the same mindset, ironically, as the socialists who, in France, just want to steal everybody's money, and even though they know that's going to like destroy the country, they just double down and keep doing it. So it's a religious commitment.
When I started getting involved in Bitcoin more heavily and speaking about it, it's not like I was preaching about it at church, but after church you talk to people, you have conversations, whatever. And I would bring up Bitcoin, and there was one guy I remember in particular who was so offended. It was like I offended his mother.
Mm-hmm.
When I said, hey, maybe fiat money is the problem. Just throwing it out there. I wasn't being a toxic maxi. Just, hey, have you considered maybe fiat money might be the actual problem? And he got really offended when I said, hey, you need to realize that every dollar is debt. Like fiat money is a debt system, and the Bible is not friendly to debt. Like, debt is not good. So if you build a whole system on debt, that can't be good. That can't be ethical. That can't be consistent with God's word. So. And he got so offended, like I offended his mother. It was the most bizarre thing. And when I read your tweet, I was like, oh, that's why. Because it's religious. This fiat money...
I've had that same conversation. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people also, they understand, like in America, for example, the dollar, right? I mean, the dollar kind of is almost this sort of religious thing. It's like a mystical sort of thing that everything that America represents, whether it's, space travel and, winning the world wars and liberty and the Constitution, like it's also kind of symbolized by the dollar. And so if you go against the dollar in the mindset of so many people, you're going against, America. And it's weird because the point is that, no, it's the elites that have gone against America by destroying the dollar, you see. So the dollar needs to be rescued is actually the point. The only way to rescue the dollar would be, again, like, I don't even know if it could be done given how big the debt is, but like to get basically into the Federal Reserve System, base it on Bitcoin is about the only way to save the dollar if you were to try to save the dollar. But I don't even know if the dollar can or could be saved, given the fact that there's always going to be the temptation with the dollar to, like you said, run up the money printer again, or to go off of a hard standard. I mean, there's nothing that, because it's not actually Bitcoin, there's nothing that prevents the dollar from falling back into the same problems of the dollar, which can't happen with Bitcoin. There's no fiat Bitcoins, unless you're talking about some kind of altcoins, right? There's no fiat Bitcoin. But the dollar can, even if it got pegged somehow or backed up by Bitcoin, which I think would be helpful. It's really the only lifeline for the dollar. But I also am not sure that the dollar needs to be saved, because it's can just, like you said, like go back to being another fiat scam problem.
Yeah. Only way I could ever see this working is if somehow you programmatically connected each dollar to the Bitcoin in reserve in a decentralized way.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
But then you're asking the government to relinquish all power over the money, which is their only business, right? The government is in one business, the money business, the centralizing, controlling of the money. If you separate money and state, there essentially is no state.
Yeah.
Because what else are they going to do? At that point, it's just a free market. Like, hey, you need to pay for this service, or else you don't get it. It's not really government. It's not really taxation anymore. You're just paying for a service voluntarily, which is ideal. You know, this is what we want to see, and I think Bitcoin can do that.
I also heard a good argument too about this in regards to war. I think it was that Samson Mao guy was making an argument that war. I mean, obviously you can have war for reasons other than money. You could have ethnic, tribal, resource wars, sure, but a lot of wars are actually, at least in the modern world, propped up by and funded by fiat money.
Yeah.
And so if fiat money was gone, it's not that you couldn't have war, but a lot of the reasons why we have modern war would be gone. So yeah, there might still be resource wars, but if we were on a Bitcoin standard, it would be a lot less easy to have war based around fiat dollars.
Yeah, the wars would certainly become a lot shorter in duration as nations run out of Bitcoin. And then you got to think too, is it worth it? Because this happens in your personal life. I'm sure it happened on a national scale too. Once you start saving in Bitcoin, you realize, do I really need that thing? Is it really worth it to spend my Bitcoin on X, Y, Z? You actually become more frugal. It teaches you to
save, exactly.
Yeah, it's a phenomenon that is strange to those on the outside. But the more your money increases in value, the less you spend on stupid things.
Yeah.
You become a lot more financially savvy, a lot more wise and prudent in how you use your finances.
Why would I want to? I don't want to spend Bitcoin right now. If I spend $1,000 in Bitcoin right now, and I think about the fact that in 5 to 7 years that can be a 10x, I'm spending $10,000 of future money on something that's $1,000 now.
Right. It doesn't make much sense. The value has to match up, and I think that those incentives, Bitcoin is naturalizing the true incentive of value in people's minds, and it starts in the mind and it works out into the economy. So I think we're going to see an interesting next decade with how money operates as Bitcoin infiltrates Trojan horses its way into Wall Street and even into government. We've already seen it in El Salvador.
Exactly, and I remember some people criticized. I remember some criticisms a few years back where it was like, well, but this is like money that is international, and so therefore it's like a globalist type of money because it's not a nation state money. But the problem is that the nation state money itself is also still a problem.
Yeah,
because the nation state money allows the state to control the issuance of money and currency, which allows them to have, like we've been saying, like this ridiculous level of power that is just too easy and natural for governments and private controlled governments to abuse. And so, in other words, even if we were to say, go back to a gold standard, and let's say we got rid of the Federal Reserve and we went back to a gold standard and the government issued the money the way the Constitution talks about, and not private Federal Reserve Bank and all this kind of stuff, like there's still the temptation to meddle with, finagle the system, go to wars for that, go back and issue more notes than there is actual holdings. Because, first of all, I mean, who actually audits to see that the government has the gold to back up the dollars?
Right.
Are we going to trust a lying government to tell us, "Oh, promise we've got all the," it's a 1-to-1 peg, $1 to, however much gold. We can't trust them, right? So we're just back to it's like we would be going back to an earlier version of the problem system.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Windows 2000, not XP. It's like, but the same bugs are going to be there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Here's the thing with when people talk about globalist money, having a global money is not the problem.
Right.
Gold was the global money for a long time.
Exactly.
It wasn't that gold was defective. Gold is just a metal. It is what it is. Is the money fair, ethical, and true? And if it is, why shouldn't it be global? Of course, every human being should have access to fair, honest money. So globalism maybe globalism is the wrong term, but having a money that all humans can use is not a bad thing, unless it's unfair, unjust measure. That's the real issue.
That's a good way to put it. Right? Yeah, people think that the fact that the money is international itself is what makes it sus or bad, when it's not that, it's the misuse of the thing. And in fact, it precisely ought to be an objective, mathematics-based, protocol-based money that can't be inflated and tampered with. That's why it has to be not a nation-state controlled system.
Right. There's this meme that goes around the Bitcoin circles every now and then. Jesus with the cord of whips in the temple driving out the money changers. And the parallel is that if Jesus was walking the earth physically in his body today, he would be doing the same thing in the Federal Reserve and central banks. Do you think that's an appropriate parallel? I've heard different takes.
It's a loosely appropriate parallel because, I mean, in the context, Jesus is angry over the fact that what's supposed to be a house of prayer is being turned into a kind of, profiteering operation. So that's the immediate context, and obviously that, that's what drove him to, clear them out. But I think the basic principle is there, again, kind of going back to Proverbs, that having unjust measures and weights and so is a form of theft, and obviously theft violates the Ten Commandments. So the principle is applicable, yeah.
Would you? This is the question that gets maybe some trouble for me and others who ask it, but I'd like to ask it to Christians because I think it's interesting to get their take. Do you think Jesus would be a Bitcoiner or is a Bitcoiner, since obviously he's alive?
I do think that God gives these kinds of gifts providentially within history. I think if you look at big advancements in medicine, advancements in technology from Western civilization, a lot of those come from people who believed in God, believed in a meaningful universe, believed in, health, healing, doing good things for people. So I think a lot of those motivations of people within history were because of belief in God, and I think they were providential gifts from God. And so, yeah, I think that, and I think I did a podcast on this maybe 3 or 4 years ago, that it's like kind of God money in the sense, I don't mean that God is money, but I mean that it's a gift, I would say, providentially for humans to have a solution to a problem that has plagued humans for a long time. It's not the salvation from all problems, obviously. It's not going to make all conflicts or wars go away. It's not going to solve every economic crisis. But it is a basic solution to man's economic issues. Kind of like, if you think about the early days of the spread of Christianity, you kind of had to have providentially Koine Greek being spoken by the empire for the message to be able to spread, and that was providentially the case because Alexander the Great and etc. So, and it's the same way. Like the internet needed to exist before we could have something like this. This type of thing wouldn't be possible, obviously, without the level of technology that we have. So, yeah, I think it's a providential blessing. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree as well. I see you're wearing a Satoshi shirt, so maybe the last question I ask is, do you have any theories as to who he might be? I don't think it's a she. People say he or she. I don't think it's a she. But anyways,
I don't. I mean, I've looked at a lot of these, claims and the people and this and that over the years, and I'm not really worried about it. I don't have any real theories. I mean, I've always kind of thought maybe Max Kaiser, but nobody thinks it's Max Kaiser. But Max was involved in the inventing a kind of algorithmic tracking system for betting on. It was called the Hollywood Stock Exchange, and he sold it. So there's a patent on it, and he would always talk about this patent to kind of talk about his pedigree. And I was always wondering, well, why was he always talking about that patent and pedigree? Now, I mean, obviously that's not Bitcoin, but what it shows is that he foresaw a future, and when he was going on Alex back in the day in 2011, he was always talking about the future casino gulag where people would be living out their life on the internet and like buying and trading fake currencies. I don't think he was talking about Bitcoin. I think he was talking about the imposter versions. And so I've always thought maybe he might have had a role. Maybe Satoshi was multiple people in the community of the cyberpunks or whatever. But no, I don't have any hard theories. Obviously, I don't think it's like Craig Wright or anything. But I don't know. What do you think?
personally, I think it's Adam Back.
Yeah, I thought I was gonna say he's probably the next best contender.
But it is what it is. Like to me, it doesn't matter either. The thing is it took on a life of its own.
Exactly right.
Even if Satoshi came out and sold all his Bitcoin today, I mean, he would not be incentivized to do so. But even if he did, I think you see a market dump and then it recovers. So it really doesn't matter at this point. I just think it's a fun little thing to think about. You left some interesting little clues, October 31st, the white paper, and then January, whatever, he issues the software and stuff. So the Genesis block, there's all these theories about, is he a Christian? Did he have biblical, did he leave little biblical things along the way? I don't know, maybe. But regardless, it is what it is, and I'm glad he's anonymous. And it kind of had to be that way because eCash failed, or eGold, I think it was called eGold, because it was centralized. The only way a digital currency is going to survive in this day and age is if no one knows who made it, and it just proliferates by itself.
I think it had to be an anonymous beginning for it to work. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, do you have any last words? Where can people find you?
If people want to check out my stuff, I have a link for Swan Bitcoin. If they want to get started with Bitcoin, you can use my link. It's in all my videos. You can follow me on YouTube, Twitter, under my name. And if you want to get my books, you can get them at the shop at my website.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate your time. Until next time, everyone, thanks for watching, and grace and peace.
Great chat, man. Thank you.
Your family, your nation, and your world needs strong men. The devil wants men weak, emasculated, and addicted to porn. This is why I designed the Slaying the Beast course to help men take back the dominion porn stole from them. This course will help you discover your identity as God's image, how porn leverages and twists that against you, and how with God's help you can turn the tables on the beast and live free. There's also access to a Discord server where you can have fellowship with others in the fight. You do not have to wait any longer to conquer this beast once and for all. Go to lifegiverchurch.net to get started today.